Kazematten, Grotten, Sante.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Fucking hell, I ain't used to all this foreign language. Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. I've got another one here from Belgium today, and it is from the Kazematten Brewery, or Brewery Kazematten, and they're from a place called Ypres in Belgium. Now, if that sounds familiar, you will have heard it before because you've been looking at a World War One battlefield, probably one of the greatest World War One battlefields, certainly in Belgium. But there was a lot of soldiers, certainly from the United Kingdom, that died there, and the Commonwealth too. It was basically a bloodbath. And when you hear names like Passchendaele, that was fought over 3 times. There were 3 major battles of Ypres. And there's just so much history around that place during the early part of the 20th century that, it should be treated with a lot of respect. And if any of you have ever been to the Menin Gate, then you'll know how sombre that occasion is. I've been to a few of the World War One graveyards, especially there's one in the Somme called Serre Road, and it's really moving. And you just cannot imagine the scale of the slaughter that went on in the First World War. And the reason I'm banging on about the First World War is because this lot are based in Ypres. But not only that, the name Kazematten comes from the word casemate. What is a casemate? That is a gun emplacement, a bomb-proof gun emplacement. And there were loads of these situated around Ypres. Basically, the Allies were defending it against the Germans. And where it comes into play and where they've got a really good right to use that name is that they mature their beer in these casemates. Now, you could argue that's very similar to how lager is fermented. It's usually cold all year round, especially around Flanders. I don't know if you've ever been in Flanders in the winter, but believe me, I did a gig there 2008. And I've never been as cold as that in all my life. It is flat, and that wind, this was in November, it's so flat and the wind will just cut you to pieces there on a winter's night. Fuck knows what them soldiers were going through in the First World War. It must have been hell. And I was there in November. Imagine what it was like when it was snowing. Christ, you can only imagine. But this is where this beer's heritage comes from, and they've got a lot of connections with World War One as well. They have a beer called the Wipers Times. Now, it's being typically British, a lot of British soldiers had trouble with the Flemish language, just a bit like me really, and they couldn't pronounce Ypres. It's spelled Y-P-R-E-S, and they just thought, well, fuck it, we're going to call it Wipers. And that's what it was known as, Wipers. And they wrote in the trenches, because it was, I wouldn't say it was mundane, but, there were times when they had time to themselves and they just thought, well, what can we do? And they wrote a newspaper and they circulated it around the trenches, and it was just, just gossip, humorous stories, features, etc. But it was called the Wipers Times. If you want to look that up, there's a documentary, and I think it's presented by Ian Hislop, about the Wipers Times and how it came into being, etc. Look it up, very interesting. If you like your history, I love my history. I'm into World War One and World War Two history. I've written a book about World War One as well, if you're interested. But that's how much I'm into World War One history, and I picked this up just because it was different. And just doing research about the beer, I realised the strong sort of heritage they've got with World War One. So it's quite humbling. And that's probably why I'm not I'm not pissing about in this review because, you know, I don't know what it is, but when it comes to World War One, you just, people like us can't understand what it was like, and I don't really want to joke about things like that. It's just, the occasion is just too big to be made jolly of. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, enough about that. Let's investigate this beer. Right, it's 6.5%. I don't know what style of beer this is. It's not been made clear. Now it's fermented like a lager, but it's top fermented, and it contains herbs, it contains spices, which a lot of Belgian beers do. But it contains stuff a little bit out of the ordinary. So I really don't know what to make of it. As I said, 330ml bottle. I can't read that because my eyesight is fucking shit. But the ingredients are, water, hops, barley and yeast, but it also contains herbs and spices. It doesn't make any indication as to what these herbs and spices are. So the only way we're going to find out is to get this open and check it out. Right, this is the very first beer I've had from the Kates, I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced, Kazematten. Maybe the Dutch subscriber can give me a bit of enlightenment on that, but I'm pronouncing that Kazematten. Here is how it's written on the cap. There you go. It's frothing out the bottle, so I'm just going to pour it in there now. I've had really bad luck with shit like that happening today. I had the Northern Monk Imperial Stout, the collaboration with Lervig, go absolutely everywhere, which was not pleasant. There it is in the glass. It looks like a double, which again is interesting. I was expecting a blonde. This is a double fermented in cold caves. Oh wow. Now that really does smell interesting. There's like a really sweet, pungent aroma coming from that. It's like caramel malt, and it's almost like a strawberry jam, if you can imagine that. And this is bottle conditioned as well, so I'm assuming it's got some candy sugar in it too. But that smells really sweet. I have to say the head retention on that is very good indeed. But there's like it's almost like ginger, sweet ginger. Tomato ketchup, if you can imagine that. Honestly, this is what I'm getting from it. It smells really interesting. Now this has got me intrigued. Now this is bottle conditioned, so I'm going to give it a bit of a swirl, get all that yeast up out of it. It's supposed to be drunk from a chalice, so at least I've got that right. There it is in the glass. It looks like a really nice Belgian double, but it's not down as a Belgian double. So who knows? I am going in completely blind here, so wish me luck. Your good health. Wow. That is spicy. Now, there's one thing I have to make clear from this, which I didn't. I should have done this on the intro. Peter Kellis. You remember that name? If it sounds familiar, he's the fella that basically brought Belgian Vit beer. He revived the style with Hoegaarden, and this was one of his recipes. Hence the reason I'm assuming there's lots of spice in there. If you look at my video on the history of Vit beer, Belgian Vit beer or Belgian wheat beer, you'll find all about Peter Kellis. But this is one of his creations, and it's the same recipe that he originally came up with. So there is no difference from the original. But that's really interesting. It's reminding me of a Belgian double, but the body is like a blonde. It's quite light. It hasn't quite got that big body of a Belgian double. I can taste some candy sugar in there, and there's some spices and herbs too. It's like there's coriander. Not really getting any banana and clove in there. There's caramel malt on that. Carbonation is really big. So I'm going to give this a bit of a swirl. And I'm not surprised, it's bottle conditioned, and the head retention, as I mentioned before, I know I'm repeating myself, but that's really good. But it's a very interesting beer. I'm getting slight aromas of ginger and flavours of ginger on it as well, which is bizarre in a Belgian beer. I mean, look at that. That is really nice. The lacing on that, when I give that a swirl, that is lovely. There's quite a dry finish to this, and a very, very slightly bitter finish to it as well. Now, normally on a double, you'd be getting quite a sweet finish on it. Not with this. This is reasonably bitter, and I'm not sure whether that's coming from the spices they put in here, or it's the yeast. And there's cherry in there as well now. I'm getting sort of dark cherry, almost like a creek. I am getting that on there. Wow, this is so complex. And quite nice too. And it's making me want to drink more, because with every mouthful, I'm getting different flavours. It's unmistakably Belgian. You would not mistake that for another type of beer, certainly not German. There's sweetness to it, but there's also bitterness from the spice, and there's, when I say spice, I mean there's pepper. There's black and white pepper, so I'm assuming that's a mix of the yeast and the hops that have gone into this. But it's so complex. It really is bombarding me with loads of flavours. And I had this down as a double. This is a bit more complex than a double, in my opinion. Wow, just even when I do that, the aromas that come off it are huge. It's like there's an apple, a sour apple, coming off the aroma. It really is reminding me of there's everything in this. There's like a double. You've got like a lambic. You've got the sourness from a lambic. And then you've got the sweetness from a creek. And it's all in here, which is really, really confusing me. In a good way. In a really good way. Now, I've drank I had the Northern Monk tonight, the 9% North Star, the collaboration with Lervig, and I had the Menabrea Amber, which I didn't think much of at all. And I just saw this in a little bottle, and I assumed it was going to be a blonde, an easy drinking blonde, but this is so much more. It really is. Again, that sourness. It's almost like a lambic. I'd love to know how if there's a spontaneous fermentation going in this, or whether they put lactobacillus in this, because to my mind, and I might be way off here, but this is what I'm getting. It's a cross between a double and a lambic, and there's a bit of a creek in there as well. But it's just typically Belgian. but it's so good. There's definitely a sourness to it. So if you're not a fan of sour beer, avoid it. I love sour beer, and that's why it's confusing me, because I'm trying to put it into a category. I'm wondering whether it's a Flanders red ale, whether it's a double, whether it's a blend. I really don't know. But I'll tell you something, this is really nice. It's a sipper, in my opinion. You need to sip it just to get all them complex flavours. Because with every mouthful, certainly the first few, you're really going to be confused. But I like it. This is really nice. And I'm discovering new flavours with every mouthful. Give it a swirl. There's a lot of carbonation, as you know, on the first couple of mouthfuls, which you normally get. Always give it a swirl. That'll make it a lot smoother. And sometimes you'll get other flavours, and I'm definitely getting it with that. This is where I'm picking up all that sourness. But I have to say, this is very nice. So what's the verdict on Kazematten Grotten Sante? Well, Grotten means cave in Flemish, and that's where they've fermented this. And this put me in mind of a blonde for some reason. I don't know why, because I thought it was going to be, you know, lagered, bottom fermented, and it was going to be some sort of Belgian Pilsner. Wow, how wrong was I? This is a top fermented cross between, in my opinion, this is what I'm getting. I don't care what the brewers say, but in my mind, I'm getting a cross between a double and a lambic, but not a Flemish red ale. Well, I suppose there is a little bit on that as well, but it's got a sourness to it, which is really nice, and it's got a sweetness to it, you know, which you get on the initial swallow. But it's so complex, and it's really nice. Definitely a sipper, not one to gulp down. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I really do like this. This has got a lot going for it. First beer I've had from Kazematten, and as I mentioned before about the World War I connection, I'm going to see if I can get hold of a bottle of the Wipers Times, because if it's as good as this stuff and it's as complex as this, then I think I am going to be in for a treat. This for me is a 9 out of 10. I'm not going to give it a 10 out of 10 because, do you know what? I really can't work it out. It's just blown my mind. It is that complex, but it's really nice. Really do recommend this. So 9 out of 10. Get some. I got that on. Oh, it was one from the Belgian beer company. They're from Staffordshire. First order I've had from them, and they do some quite good beers. So get yourself online and have a look at the Belgian beer company. They do some quite good beers, and that's where I got that from. And remember, beer is working class champagne.